Hello my fellow YouTubers and subscribers, and welcome to my latest movie review, where today I review the 2007 family film Bridge to Terabithia, released by Walden Media and Icon Studios. So, Bridge to Terabithia. This is a film I have wanted to talk about for quite some time, so I hope you enjoy this review. So, Bridge to Terabithia. This film was released in 2007 and was directed by Gabor, Csupo, I think that's how you say his name. It was based on a book, I believe, by, I think Catherine Paterson is her name, but forgive me if I'm wrong. But the screenplay was done by Jeff Stockwell and David Patterson. The film stars Josh Hutcherson and AnnaSophia Robb and Zooey Deschanel and Robert Patrick. There's quite a few big names in this film. So the plot of Bridge to Terabithia is as follows. We focus on two kids. Sorry, I don't know why I did that. We focus on two kids, the first of which is a boy called Jess, presumably short for Jesse, I'm assuming, but we call him Jess. Jess is a 12-year-old kid. He is sort of isolated. He doesn't have many friends. He gets bullied in school, though he is quite a talented artist. And he befriends a new girl who moves in, literally next door to him, called Leslie Burke. And Leslie is somewhat of a fantasist, and she loves, you know, her parents are writers, and she loves writing stories and coming up with all different things. And together, the two of them sort of befriend each other, and they, in the woods, they imagine this magical place called Terabithia. Of course, the place isn't real. They're just, what we see is what they're imagining. And they also basically are trying to overcome the problems they're having in the real world. Jess is having issues with bullies, so is Leslie. They're trying to get back at their bullies. Jess is also trying to fix the relationship with his dad, because his dad isn't as close to him as he'd want to be. I mean, Jess is actually one of 5 kids, and I can relate to that. I'm one of 5 kids, and he has 4 sisters. I can relate to that. It's also a coming-of-age story about the real world and how to sort of accept reality in a way. You know, there's the whole kind of commentary on fantasy and reality when they do something quite interesting in the third act, which I will go into later. Okay, Bridge to Terabithia. This is a really wonderful film. It's not a perfect movie. I won't go as far as to call it a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. It's not that good, but it's a very solid film. I really enjoyed it. I think what's really good about this film is that it is essentially a coming-of-age story about Jess, mainly. He learns to accept that he needs to accept the real world and stop living having his head in the clouds all the time. And, you know, Leslie provides that chance for him to escape his life, and that's why he befriends her, because he's allowed to escape the horrors of his real life. You really do see why Jess and Leslie become friends, because they're both having trouble in the real world. They both don't really fit in with the real world, so that's what gels them together. It's not necessarily a romantic storyline as such. They don't develop the friendship into a romance, which I'm actually quite glad about, because that's too often a cliche in many of these films. But I think, I mean, there's definitely implications of other characters teasing them about being a couple, but they never actually state that Jess and Leslie are boyfriend and girlfriend. I think it could have developed into that had Leslie actually, you know, progressed further into the story, hint hint. But what I like about this film is the way they depict the kind of fantasy sequences, the fact that it is all literally in their imaginations. This film, I mean, I didn't really understand it when I was younger, but now looking at it, I see why they do this. They are showing like all the creatures and everything, and all the CGI landscapes and everything of the magical kingdom, because that is what's in their head, and you really get an understanding of Leslie's psyche, essentially. How at first you would think she's kind of nuts, she's kind of crazy, but no, she's literally a fantasist. She just loves making up stories, and she loves imagining them for real life. And Jess likes that as well, because he's an artist, he can draw, and together they form a pretty good team, and they really become best of friends, and they really open up to each other, which I really like. So the friendship is really solid. For me, the criticisms of this film are the tonal inconsistencies. I feel that perhaps the third act of the film could be a little bit of a jarring shift in tone to some people. It doesn't bother me too much, because it's quite bold. I mean, the fact that they kill off Leslie is quite dramatic, really, and it's quite bold. It works for the story. But tonally, the movie never really found its place for me. The first two acts, there are moments where there's montages of pop songs, and to me, those parts are the weakest parts of the film because they just feel so cheesy. Like, there's a part when Jess and Leslie are building the treehouse, and then there's a part when Jess and Leslie are painting Leslie's wall, and it's just a cheesy pop song. It doesn't have any impact for me. It's weightless, and it just completely derives the sort of dramatic tone of the film. It's just makes it so jarring when they suddenly shift to the third act of the film when Leslie dies, and it's all very weird to me. It's a weird inconsistency. There's a lot of tonal conflicts in this film, and I don't think the film tonally really found its place. I mean, aside from the montages, you basically get most of the scenes are in the school and Jess and Leslie in the forest, and there's some lovely, charming moments about their friendship and opening up and, you know, seeing the struggles in their lives. And so the film has a fairly solid dramatic tone, but I think it's just the cheesiness of those pop songs that detracts it for me. I also like the film's commentary on bullies and school bullies. The fact that, you know, sometimes bullies are victims too. The character of Janice, who is initially a bully, we discover that she actually is being abused by her father, which is quite a dramatic little thing to include for this what is to be a family movie. But again, this is a commentary on fantasy and reality, and the way that they perceive Janice in the fantasy world is like a troll. And I love the parallels between the real world and the Terabithian fantasy world, and I think that's what's really interesting about this film. And when Janice is revealed to be the troll, that's kind of funny. But actually, her as a character, even though she doesn't have many lines in the film, it works. There's not this big scene with Janice crying in the toilets and everything. We just hear from Leslie, and sometimes hearing it from another person is actually harder to hear than the real thing. And I think sometimes that works better in effect. I think for the film, it was an interesting idea because we didn't need to see Janice completely break down as a character. We just heard everything that Leslie and her spoke about. And I thought that was a really clever way of doing it because it didn't make Janice an overly sappy character. She really was a real character in that she confided in someone personally, and she you know, she's not the type of person who's going to open up lightly about this sort of thing. And of course, her victimization meant that she was taking everything out on the kids at the school. And I mean, yes, you could argue she did deserve the humiliation of what Jess and Leslie did to her, but I think it was interesting because it allowed us to understand more about her as a character. I think Janice is a great character and really understated character. I really felt sorry for her, actually. And that was something that the film, I think, did that was clever. It was unexpected. It made you sympathise with someone who is a bully. And again, that's what we don't always know about bullies. Sometimes they're the victims too. And I like that message. I like the commentary in this film on that. That's really good. I think the cast are terrific in this film. Josh Hutcherson plays Jess. Now, Josh Hutcherson is a really good actor. He's really come a long way. He actually first appeared in the film Zathura, which I haven't reviewed yet. I might review that at some point. And he also appeared most famously in the Hunger Games franchise, all 4 of those films. Josh Hutcherson is a great actor, and in this movie, this could be his best performance. He is really good, especially when he has to play the grieving friend in the third act. He really does. You really do feel sorry for the guy. He's had quite a hard life, I think, and he plays a character who's really kind of just shy. He's just not. He gets into a comfort zone, and then life kicks him in the teeth. You know, he loses his best friend, and his life falls apart, or so he thinks. But he manages to salvage relationships with his sister, with his dad, and, you know, we can see at the beginning of the film he's just a bit lost. He doesn't know where he doesn't know where he is, and he lives in a house with 4 sisters, you know, 2 of which are teenagers, one of which is like she's like 5 or 6, and then the other's a baby, and then he's got his 2 parents. The dad works at a hardware store as a manager, so he doesn't earn a lot of money. The mum presumably doesn't work at all because she's looking after the baby. The sisters, I don't know what they do. They're just there. I don't know what they do. And he does a lot of chores. They live on a farm, so they're not very rich. So he's just kind of fed up of his life. But when Leslie comes into his life, he does manage to find some happiness. Although they don't develop a romance, which is fine. But I think it's nice to see his change in character. And then in the end of the film, how he does manage to move on from her death, and he's obviously in quite a lot of denial at first when he discovers that Leslie has died, and then he decides to pass on what they shared and share the world with his sister, and he realizes actually how much his little sister really loves him. He looks at a drawing that she did of him like beating a monster or something, and that was really beautiful. I thought that was a very beautiful moment. And then at the end of the film I thought was very nice when him and Mabel go into the forest, and he looks like, yeah, he's moved on from Leslie, and he's going to keep her memory alive by sharing Terabithia with his sister, which I think is really, really beautiful. So the emotional story is really well done. I also have to criticize some of the CGI. I think some of the CGI is a bit tacky. There's a moment when Jess and Leslie are running through the forest, and it's done in front of a green screen. I know it's meant to accentuate them running really, really fast, but surely they were filming half of that scene in an original forest anyway. So why have CGI trees and stuff? It just doesn't make sense to me. It just looks odd visually. It looks really odd. I think also the CGI for the creatures, the design of some of the creatures is not terribly interesting. Like the creatures that Jess and Leslie are imagining in the forest are not terribly intuitive. Apart from the troll. The troll looks pretty good, but there's vultures, and then there's these things called the Scrogers, which of course they perceive the bullies as the antagonists in their fantasy world as well, which is kind of clever. And yeah, I think that was interesting. There's also another character called Miss Edmonds. She's a music teacher, played by Zooey Deschanel. I mean, appropriate casting, isn't it? I mean, Zooey Deschanel is very, very much known for her music. And there's a great moment when they sing a song, "Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends?" That was nice. That was the one song I'll let you get away with, because that was charming. That was nice. And they were doing it in music class and whatnot. This thing about Jess actually fancying his teacher, it's a little bit weird. It doesn't really need to be in the film, but okay, fine. And then there's this moment when she invites him to a museum. I mean, surely you would need the school's permission for that, but no, she just suddenly has his contact details and decides to phone him on the day and say, "Want to come to the museum with me?" So I don't know if that really if that works in a realistic sense, but I'll let the film get away with it. It doesn't matter too much. But I like Zooey Deschanel in the film, and she plays a very good character. I think her character's very sweet, very, very nice. She's a good teacher, and she really thinks a lot of Jess, and she thinks he's talented, and she doesn't want him to be, succumb by the bullies. I thought there was a powerful scene when Jess was back at school after Leslie had died, and then his bully behind him said, "Oh, it looks like you're the fastest boy in the class now," because Jess was running. He loves to run, and Leslie was also running, and there was a race scene earlier where she beat him, but then he turns around and punches him in the face. I mean, that was you just felt like, yes, finally there's some satisfying karma there. And the teacher, I like the fact that the teacher identified with Jess when she took him outside and she spoke to him, and she said, "Look, we all deal with grief in different ways. I mean, I lost my husband. It must be hard for me, but I can't imagine how hard it is for you because you're younger, you're a kid." And I loved that moment. The teacher is not a major character in the film. Myers, I think her name is. She is not a major character, but that scene made her instantly likable and made her instantly interesting. The film does a great job of expressing someone who has lost someone, and then the grief that tears Jess apart. And again, the denial of, are they actually dead or not? And then he does realise she's dead. And I thought the ending when he put the little raft and he put the picture of her on the raft and he let it float away. That was just a beautiful moment of symbolism, and I thought that performance was really, really good. The scene also when his dad finds him in the forest and then he breaks down in front of his dad, and his dad realises that Leslie was important to him and really actually made a difference to his life. And then his dad, I think, realises that he's been a bit tough on his son. And I think Robert Patrick is good as the dad, but the dad does seem to be very tough on his son. He really is quite strict on his son, and I think that's the point of the film, is that he realises that his son needed to be a bit more nurtured. His son was kind of lonely, and he was kind of lost without a friend, and now he needs his family more than ever. So I think that it does a good job of displaying father and son relationships as well. I have to say, I'm very lucky. My dad is still here, and my dad is very is very lovely. He's always been great to me. And if you're watching this, Dad, then thank you. And one last thing, the music. I love the soundtrack to this film. It is a really great soundtrack, especially the opening scene when Jess is running, and then we're seeing all the artwork drawings of literally the pencil is literally drawing everything, and we're hearing this glorious, epic music. It's really good. It's just when it deviates into the pop songs, that's when I lose interest a bit. So overall, despite its tonal inconsistencies, Bridge to Terabithia is a good film, and it is a very solid film. It's not the best thing ever made. I mean, the poster, the cover could be very misleading. You would think that this is a fantasy movie, but I actually think it's a emotional drama with fantasy elements in it. So that's where I think this could be a bit misleading, but I like it for what it is. It's a really solid film and features some terrific performances, a great commentary about fantasy and reality, a great commentary about emotional grief, and some of the decisions are quite bold in the story, like when they kill off Leslie. But yes, please let me know what you think of this film down below, and I am going to finish up by scoring this film. I think I'll give it an 8 out of 10. It's a very solid film. It's a very solid piece of film. And obviously Walden Media, who produced The Chronicles of Narnia, did this film. So they should be very proud. They should be very proud of this. Anyway, thank you very much all for watching this review, and stay tuned for more videos. And until next time, I'm Mr. TARDIS11. See you soon. Bye for now.